the Tierlock story just got a lot stranger. Because at first, this looked like one lawsuit. Payken allegedly owed roughly $3.2 million tied to a liquidity pool arrangement. Then the complaint alleged that funds, software, intellectual property, and business resources were moved into affiliate Tierlock. Allegedly. Which is already a pretty big problem. But after the first video, another investigator started digging into the people and companies around Payken, and one name kept leading somewhere else. Blackwise. And Blackwise does not show up in another crypto case. It shows up in a completely different world. Healthcare billing, Medicaid, schools, student referrals, mental health services, and serious fraud allegations that were never proven in court. So now the question is not just what happened with Payken and Tierlock. The question is whether we are looking at a larger pattern. Related companies, sensitive industries, disputed money flows, infrastructure companies, and businesses asking the public to trust them. I'm Rebecca Wilson, and this is part 2 of our Tierlock investigation. Before we get into it, I want to be very clear. The prior Medicaid allegations were not proven. The current Payken-Tierlock lawsuit has not been decided. And this video is not claiming the old case proves the new one. It does not. But when the same business orbit keeps showing up around trust-based industries and money flow allegations, that is worth looking at. Because in the first video, the big question was simple. What happened to the money? In this video, the question is bigger. Have we seen this structure before? In the first video, we looked at the Delaware lawsuit involving Payken. The basic allegation was that Payken owed roughly $3.2 million connected to a payment processing liquidity pool. That alone would be serious. But the part that made the lawsuit more interesting was what the complaint allegedly said happened next. According to the allegations described in the complaint, Payken allegedly transferred liquidity pool funds and business resources to affiliate Tierlock. The complaint also allegedly claims Payken allowed Tierlock to use Payken intellectual property and software to create a similar payment platform. That is where the story moves beyond a normal debt dispute. Because if money was allegedly owed to one entity, but resources were allegedly moved into another related company, then the issue becomes who benefited, who was left exposed, and whether the people relying on these companies understood the relationship between them. That was the core question in video 1. But after that video, the next question became obvious. Who are the people and companies around Payken? That leads us to J.R. Ford, also referred to publicly as Jason Ford. Public materials identify J.R. Ford as the founder of Payken, and a Payken profile says Jason founded Payken and another Web3 company called 3SET. So he is not some random name floating around the edges of the story. He is publicly connected to Payken at the founder level. And when you start looking at Jason Ford's earlier business history, another company appears. Blackwise LLC. At first, Blackwise feels like a completely different universe. Payken and Tierlock are connected to crypto-linked payments, liquidity pools, access infrastructure, fraud prevention, and payment systems. Blackwise appears in older litigation involving healthcare services, Medicaid billing, schools, student referrals, and mental health treatment. And I know what you might be thinking. What does Medicaid billing have to do with a crypto payment company? That is exactly why this is interesting. Because on the surface, these are totally different industries. But when you zoom out, the structure starts to feel familiar. According to a 2023 Texas appellate opinion, the Abundant Life defendants included Jason Ford, Blackwise LLC, SS of MA LLC doing business as a Ford 2 Bill, Evolve Outreach Texas LLC, Presidium Prime LLC, and others. That same opinion says Blackwise LLC was a Wyoming LLC owned by Jason Ford. It also says SS of MA was owned by Jason Ford, and Evolve Outreach Texas was owned by Jason Ford and Melvin Anderson. So the chain is pretty simple. J.R. Ford is publicly connected to Payken. Jason Ford is connected to Blackwise. Texas appellate records identify Blackwise as a Wyoming LLC owned by Jason Ford, and Blackwise appears in older litigation involving Abundant Life Therapeutic Services Texas LLC, a Houston-based mental health services provider. Not as the main healthcare provider, but as an alleged part of the billing flow. That is where the pattern starts to matter. The older federal case was brought by Thomas Headen, who filed a qui tam whistleblower case involving Abundant Life Therapeutic Services Texas LLC and others. The allegations were serious. He alleged violations of the Federal False Claims Act, the Anti-Kickback Statute, and the Texas Medicaid Fraud Prevention Act. The basic allegation was that Abundant Life and people connected to it were involved in a scheme where benefits, donations, or services were allegedly used to induce student referrals, and then services connected to those students were allegedly billed to Medicaid. Again, these were allegations, not findings, but the details are what make the older case relevant to the larger story. According to the federal court's summary of the allegations, the complaint claimed that school uniforms, a washer and dryer, and educational supplies were provided to a school principal. It claimed that free skills-building services were provided during school hours. It claimed that students were then referred for mental health services and assessments. And then Blackwise enters the picture. The complaint claimed that Desiree Munoz, an employee of Blackwise LLC, billed Medicaid for certain assessments connected to Abundant Life. So Blackwise was not just some random company mentioned in passing. In the allegations, Blackwise was part of the billing story. The complaint also alleged a similar referral structure involving Rhodes Charter Elementary, where computers were allegedly donated, students were allegedly referred, and Medicaid was allegedly billed for initial assessments. According to the court's summary, Headen alleged that this activity increased Abundant Life's monthly revenue from $230,000 to $800,000. That is a serious allegation, because in healthcare, especially Medicaid-funded healthcare, trust is everything. You are talking about public money, children, schools, referrals, billing, compliance, and medical necessity. So when a Jason Ford-owned company appears in allegations involving a billing structure in that kind of environment, it is worth understanding. But this is where we have to be precise. The federal court did not rule that the alleged Medicaid scheme was proven. The court dismissed the federal claims because the complaint did not meet Rule 9b, which is the heightened pleading standard for fraud claims. In plain English, if you accuse someone of fraud in court, you have to plead the details. You need the who, the what, the when, the where, and the how. In False Claims Act cases, you generally need either details of specific false claims or enough reliable indicators to create a strong inference that false claims were actually submitted. The court said Headen did not get there. It found that he did not plead enough specific details tying the alleged donations, services, referrals, and Medicaid billing into a properly pleaded fraud claim. So, the federal counts were dismissed with prejudice, and the Texas Medicaid Fraud Prevention Act claim was dismissed without prejudice. That distinction matters because people tend to oversimplify cases like this. One side might say, the case was dismissed, so there was nothing there. The other side might say, they were accused of Medicaid fraud, so they did it. The accurate version is more careful than either of those. Serious allegations were made. The court did not find those allegations proven. The court dismissed them because the complaint did not plead the alleged fraud with enough detail. That is not the same thing as a court finding that the alleged conduct never happened. But it is also not proof that it did happen. Then there was also the Dallas County State case, cause number DC-18-15576 in the 68th Judicial District Court. And this part is important because Headen did not win that case. A lot of his claims were dismissed under the Texas Citizens Participation Act, which is Texas's anti-SLAPP law. And in the final 2023 appeal, The Texas Fifth Court of Appeals affirmed a take-nothing summary judgment in favor of Abundant Life. The court also affirmed attorneys' fees and sanctions. So we are not hiding that. The older litigation did not end with the court validating Headen's fraud allegations. The federal case was dismissed on pleading grounds, and the Dallas state case ultimately ended with a take-nothing judgment against him. That matters, but it does not make the history irrelevant. Because this video is not about saying the prior cases proved fraud. It is about the structure of the allegations and why that structure matters now. In the older story, the trust-sensitive world was healthcare. The allegations involved Medicaid billing, school referrals, public healthcare funds, and a company allegedly functioning as part of the billing flow. In the newer story, the trust-sensitive world is crypto-linked payments. The allegations involve liquidity pool money, investor and lender exposure, payment infrastructure, and an affiliate company allegedly benefiting from assets, software, and intellectual property tied to Payken. Different industry, different lawsuit, different outcome. But the shape of the story has familiar ingredients: a sensitive market where trust is essential, a cluster of related entities, allegations about how money moved, and a company sitting in the middle as infrastructure. That is the part that makes this worth investigating. Not because the old case proves the new case. It does not. But because the same kinds of concerns keep coming back. Control, disclosure, money flow, related companies, and what stakeholders actually understood before they got involved. Now let's bring this back to Tierlock. Tierlock is not presenting itself as a casual app or a random side project. It is positioning itself as the kind of company operators rely on when access, payments, verification, fraud controls, and transaction records matter. That means Tierlock is asking the market to trust it at the infrastructure level. Not just to trust the branding or the website, but to trust the systems that can affect who gets access, how payments are handled, how risk is evaluated, and how records are created. That is why the Payken allegations matter so much. The Delaware complaint alleges Payken transferred assets to Tierlock. It alleges Tierlock is controlled by Payken or under common control with Payken. It alleges Payken allowed Tierlock to use Payken IP and software. And it alleges liquidity pool resources were used to support Tierlock. Those allegations have not been proven, but they are serious because they go directly to the thing Tierlock is trying to sell: trust. And Tierlock's public terms make that trust issue even more important. The company's own terms describe operator-facing services that touch payment-related functionality, settlement support, chargebacks, reserves, sweepstakes mechanics, stablecoin translation, and related funds flow issues. In other words, Tierlock is not describing itself like a simple login widget. It appears to be operating in areas where access, payments, settlement, compliance, and user trust can all collide. That does not make Tierlock guilty of anything. But it does mean that if a lawsuit alleges Payken resources were moved into Tierlock, the public has a legitimate reason to care about that relationship. A company operating around payment infrastructure and funds flow mechanics should be able to explain who controls it, how related entities fit together, and what partners were told. That is also why the smaller public-facing details matter more than they normally would. A typo or placeholder contact page does not prove wrongdoing. But when a company markets itself around trust, transparency, and payment infrastructure, sloppy or inconsistent public materials become part of the trust story. Payken's public contact page, when reviewed, showed placeholder-style information, including a 123 Main Street address, a 12345678990 phone number, and an email that said contact@mysite.com. Payken's terms also had an arbitration section that referred to Payken instead of Payken. Again, that does not prove fraud. But when the business is asking people to trust it with payment infrastructure, the details matter. And the bigger issue is that too much of this story has to be pieced together from lawsuits, court records, old litigation, scattered public pages, and company terms. That is the problem. If the product is trust, the public should not have to reverse engineer the trust story. People should not have to dig through old litigation just to understand who is connected to what. They should not have to wonder whether an affiliate relationship was fully explained. And they should not have to learn through a lawsuit that a payment infrastructure company may be connected to allegations involving unpaid obligations and liquidity pool transfers. So here is the cleanest version of what we have. J.R. Ford is publicly connected to Payken. Jason Ford is connected to Blackwise. Texas appellate records identify Blackwise as a Wyoming LLC owned by Jason Ford. Blackwise appeared in prior litigation involving Abundant Life and Medicaid-related allegations. Those allegations were not proven, and the prior litigation ultimately did not end in Headen's favor. Now Payken is facing a separate Delaware lawsuit alleging that assets, software, intellectual property, and liquidity pool resources were transferred to affiliate Tierlock. Those allegations have also not been proven. But together, these records raise a legitimate pattern question. Why do related entities keep appearing around sensitive industries where trust is the entire product? And why do the allegations keep circling around money flow and infrastructure? That is the issue. The old case does not prove the new case. Tierlock has not been found liable. Payken has not been found liable. But investors, lenders, operators, promotional partners, and users still deserve to understand the history and relationships behind the companies they are being asked to trust. Because that is really what this comes down to. Would people have made the same decisions if they understood the full history? Would they have promoted the same infrastructure, relied on the same payment systems, or asked more questions before getting involved? Those are fair questions, and they deserve answers. One more piece I want to be careful about is J.R. Ford's exact role at Tierlock. Public materials identified J.R. Ford as Payken's founder. The Delaware complaint alleges Tierlock is Payken's affiliate, or under common control with Payken. We also found public event or social materials that appear to list J.R. Ford as CEO of Tierlock. But I have not found a strong official corporate filing, a Tierlock leadership page, or a company-owned source that confirms that role directly. So I am not going to say J.R. Ford is definitely Tierlock's CEO, unless we get that stronger source. That is the difference between reporting and guessing. But even without that missing piece, the Payken to Tierlock relationship is not internet speculation. It is alleged directly in the Delaware complaint, and the complaint's allegations are serious enough to make the relationship worth examining. So for now, the story is not that the old case proved fraud, and it is not that the new case has already been decided. The story is that a pattern is starting to emerge around related entities, sensitive industries, disputed money flows, and companies selling trust. And when the product is trust, the history matters. Because blockchain does not fix governance. A polished website does not answer litigation questions. And calling yourself trust infrastructure does not make the trust problem disappear. If anything, it makes the questions more important. I'm Rebecca Wilson, and we'll keep following the Payken-Tierlock case, the people and companies connected to it, and the questions investors, partners, operators, users, and promotional communities deserve answers to.